In Jujutsu Kaisen, there's a phenomenon known as cost technique maximum. What myself and a lot of other fans consider to be cost technique maximum. Well, cost technique maximum is basically the highest output version of a sorcerer's cost technique. It's probably the second strongest tool a sorcerer or cost spirit can have, barring domain expansion. So in this video, we are going to be looking at every time we've seen a sorcerer or cost spirit use cost technique maximum. We will also speculate on if there is any sorcerer we can expect who has or hasn't used a cost technique maximum. The very first character to use cost technique maximum in the story is Gojō Satoru. Gojo uses his cost technique maximum in the hidden inventory arc against Toji, and this was the maximum cost energy output for Gojo's cost technique blue. The maximum is named Azure Glow. Gojo's cost technique blue is a derivative of a much larger cost technique known as the Limitless, and the Limitless can only be effectively wielded by someone who possesses the 6 eyes. Gojo also has the Infinity. The Infinity creates an infinite distance between Gojo and a person or object, so no matter how fast or how long a target or object tries to approach Gojo, it would ultimately never reach him. Gojo is then able to amplify the Infinity to produce blue. Gojo's cost technique blue allows him to control and manipulate the space concept of convergence, and so Gojo is basically able to use telekinesis and control forces. But when Gojo applies the maximum cost energy output to blue, he is able to produce Azure Glow. Azure Glow is basically a highly condensed and concentrated version of blue that absorbs and contracts everything in the surrounding area to one point. It's very similar to Pain's planetary devastation from Naruto, but just like blue, it's also suspected that Gojo can also use a maximum cost energy output for red, and even in the recent chapters of the manga, Gojo also leads to imply that he can do a maximum cost energy output for Holo Technique purple. From the way it's explained in the manga, you would think that practically every sorcerer should be able to use a maximum cost technique output, but we just haven't seen it being used frequently. In fact, domain expansions, which are regarded as the peak of Jujutsu sorcery, have been used more times than the maximum cost technique output. The very next time we get to see maximum cost technique output used on screen would be from Ghetto. Ghetto's cost technique is referred to as the infamous cost manipulation. Cost manipulation allows Ghetto to absorb costs which he can then summon at will. These costs can then be used in a variety of ways. They can be used in combat, for transportation and surveillance, among other things. Ghetto's cost technique maximum is referred to as maximum Uzumaki. Ghetto's cost technique maximum, unlike Gojo's, does not rely solely on his maximum cost energy output, as the strength of Ghetto's maximum Uzumaki is heavily reliant on the amount of courses Ghetto has present, alongside the grades of the courses involved in the combination. We see Ghetto use maximum Uzumaki against Yuta in the Volume 0 movie. Ghetto combines the 4,461 courses in his arsenal into one final attack against Yuta, but despite all this, Yuta still prevailed, and it's also unclear whether the maximum cost technique is actually that of Ghetto or rather that of the special grade cost spirits present. As we see, before Ghetto uses it, he actually summons up Tamamo no Me, but it's relatively safe to assume that the maximum cost technique is actually that of Ghetto's, because we see Kenjaku use it in later arcs in the future. Kenjaku is able to somewhat utilize Uzumaki more efficiently by using them as mini Uzumakis. It's theorized that these mini Uzumakis do not consume as much cost energy as the maximum would. The very next time we see maximum cost technique used would be in the Shibuya incident arc. Jogo attempts to use his maximum cost technique against Sukuna in the Shibuya incident arc, but this proves to be useless. But honestly, is anyone actually surprised? Jogo had so much faith in the strength of his maximum cost technique, and Sukuna seems to somewhat share in the same fate, as Sukuna claims that it would have scratched he himself if it had hit. Jogo's maximum cost technique is referred to as maximum meteor. Jogo literally summons a meteorite, but unfortunately, because of his circumstances, this proved to be useless. However, not to discredit Jogo, as I said earlier, Sukuna himself acknowledged the strength of the technique. Even though it's unconfirmed, a lot of fans theorize that Perfect Spear is also a maximum cost technique. Perfect Spear is supposedly the sure hit of Yoruzu's domain expansion. Perfect Spear is stated to have an infinite amount of pressure, and as we all know, after Yoruzu did this, she was practically low on cost energy. But we also get to see Uraome, Sukuna's servant, use her cost technique maximum against Maki and Yuji. Uraome is a cost user who makes use of a Jujutsu technique that involves the weaponization of ice. Uraome's cost technique maximum, Dead Calm, is very similar to Gojo's Azure Glow, in the sense that it's pretty much just the highest possible version of her cost technique. Dead Calm just basically summons a massive amount of ice that she uses to trap her opponents, and this is very much different from what Ghetto and Jogo do. as both their maximum cost techniques share some differences with their original cost techniques. One of the death painting also sort of implies to have a cost technique maximum of his own. Also, the death painting with the cost technique Wing King states that he has a supreme technique. It could be a translation thing, and supreme technique could actually be the same as cost technique maximum. What is Eso's supreme technique? Well, that would be Eso's supreme rot technique Wing King, and here blood protrudes out of his back in the form of wings. He's capable of using this blood as an extension in combat. This blood is corrosive and poisonous to the skin. However, the reason I doubt this might actually be a cost technique maximum is the fact that the blood properties of Wing King aren't exactly exclusive to only Eso, as Choso's regular blood attacks seem to also be poisonous and corrosive to some degree, and so it's unlikely that Wing King is actually a cost technique maximum. Nanami is another sorcerer who is in the gray area. You see, we are not exactly sure whether Nanami can use cost technique maximum, but we have reasons to believe that he might just be able to. You see, Nanami is never actually using all of his cost energy reserves at any given point in time normally. Nanami has a self-inflicted binding vow, one that prevents him access to all his cost energy reserves. In exchange, when he goes over time, this cost energy is then increased to about 120% of the normal quantity. Overtime can technically be seen as a cost technique maximum, but this isn't, because the binding vow doesn't exactly affect his cost technique, rather it affects his cost energy reserves. This means that even though his cost energy is amped, this might not exactly amp his cost technique. And unlike all the others mentioned in this video, Nanami never stated that he was going to use his cost technique maximum. Nanami also has his ratio technique collapse, which some people think is a maximum because the amount of force it was able to generate surpassed what Nanami is normally capable of. But once again, I doubt that would be a cost technique maximum, but it's up for interpretation. Mechamaru is also someone that can have a maximum cost technique output. You see, after Mechamaru gets his body put back in shape, he's now able to utilize his cost energy after so many years. Mechamaru then deploys Ultimate Mechamaru, planning to use that to destroy Kenjaku and Mahito. What makes this interesting is the fact that Mechamaru is able to fire cost energy blast in form of years. And so from the explanation of cost technique maximum, if Mechamaru were to fire up the full charge, then I believe that would be his cost technique maximum. But the very fact that he fires them in beats prevents him from using his cost technique maximum. But this isn't exactly confirmed, it's more so a theory. Moving on, it's also very much possible for Yuta's cost technique maximum to be the combined blast he shared with Rika in the Volume 0 movie. I mean, when the energy Yuta and Rika's blast was able to produce was able to match that of Suguru Ghetto, a special grade sorcerer, using his own cost technique maximum, then it would only make sense that Yuta's blast with Rika was his own cost technique maximum. After all, Ghetto himself calls out what Yuta is doing, stating that such a binding vow is disgusting to surpass the limits of one cost energy. Surpassing the limits might very well have something to do with cost technique maximum. But once again, when Yuta and Rika did this in Volume 0, Yuta did not explicitly state that he was using his cost technique maximum. Chances are he didn't even know what that was at the time. Besides what we have as the confirmed users of maximum cost technique outputs, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to say that top tier characters like Yuta, Kenjaku, Kashimo, and Hanakari in some way, shape or form have access to this technique. Because if Jogo can use maximum cost technique outputs, then I wouldn't see why they shouldn't. After all, it would make more sense for literally everybody who has a domain expansion to have access to this. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like. If you have something to say, then please put it in the comments. And if you want to see more of these videos, then feel free to subscribe.